Hey, you're listening to the James Altucher Show on YouTube. You're going to learn all about peak performance from today's greatest influencers and how you can get there as well. I upload a new video every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. Don't forget to subscribe. Click on the bell notification so you don't miss a thing. Brandon, there are so many things I want to talk to you about with this new book, Mastering Fear. I at first wondered first off, welcome to the show once
Thanks.
again, Brandon Webb, author of The Killing School. Author, what's that? We've done all of your books.
Yeah.
This is like your third time on the podcast. I've been on your podcast. You're author of the New York Times bestselling The Killing School, which is how you set up the actual school in the Navy SEALs, which
The sniper
teaches
program. Yeah.
snipers. Then you wrote The Red Circle about, a lot of your experiences of your comrades in arms in among the SEALs and your adventures. And
Well, that one was when my dad threw me out of the house, and that got me. That was my story of how I ended up in the SEAL teams.
well, I'm
The
gonna
the
get to
Red
that in
Circle.
this one
Yeah.
because you talk about it here as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
This book is my personal favorite. You know why? Because
It's
this
my
one
favorite too, honestly.
it's I feel like there are so many things you say in here that during every single day I can, and I'll say the title and say, but every single day I can remind myself, oh no, Brandon mentioned this thing when this happens. And the book is called Mastering Fear. You detail so many stories. I mean, you've dealt with fear like, actually, let me just ask you this first
Sure.
question. You just, one of your first stories about yourself in the book is when you're in Afghanistan, and I couldn't quite picture graphically all the details. So you're with some of your buddies, not buddies, but other SEALs in Afghanistan, and there's like 50 Afghanistan guys kind of surrounding you, and they're not nice people to you.
Yeah.
and and you talk about the premise of this book is not, oh, I could conquer fears, I could eliminate fears, I could. The premise of this book is really powerful, which is that we're all afraid of things all the time in our lives, whether it's relationships or business or being in Afghanistan,
Yeah.
potentially being shot at. And it's not about conquering the fear, it's about using that fear to even be more powerful. It's almost like how in the book you quote Kamal talking about your superpowers. It's almost like how fear itself, you could turn it from making you into, a sniveling person in the corner, unable to do something, into a superhero by channeling that fear. So I just
It's
explain
why
that
world
Afghanistan
it's
story.
why world records are broke in competition, not in practice. Like what story have we ever heard of a world record getting broken in a practice swim match or a
You
running
know,
match?
I've wondered that. I've wondered actually when you see like Usain Bolt break a record in the Olympics. By the way, we're not avoiding Afghanistan. Just
Yeah, that's
if just in char just in case you were trying to change the topic.
happy to talk about it.
when you
Thanks.
when you see Usain Bolt run, break a record in the Olympics, a running record, is it that he never ran that fast practicing? And he I always think he's like killing that, score all the time and thinking like, "Damn, why wasn't this in the Olympics?"
Yeah, I mean, it takes that pressure and anxiousness and, which is a little bit of that fear and being able to recognize it and harness it, to elevate your performance. And, I share a lot of personal stories of my own experience dealing with fear, and we all deal with it, and I think I'm in a position where I've had some interesting experiences as a kid and a childhood and then becoming a Navy SEAL. And I think the Navy SEALs are kind of maybe overly romanticized. And it's like, oh, these guys they don't have any fear. And it's like, no, it's like everybody lives with fear. And so I felt like this book to me was, and thank you to Kamal, who, the inspiration behind the book was us having this experience, teaching him how to swim and confront his fear of the water, which he'd
Well
had all his life.
well, and that's what I thought was so great about the book. So, it's almost a mistake for me to ask you about when people are potentially shooting at you, because that's like a cliche example of when someone quite correctly is afraid. But you interweave a lot of these stories with the story of our good mutual friend Kamal Ravikant, who's actually in the room right now. With Kamal was afraid to swim. He was afraid to learn how to swim.
Yeah.
And, and you taught him how to
And
swim,
afraid of the
not by
water.
teaching him
Yeah.
how to swim, but by teaching him what you describe throughout this book, which is how do you make fear work for you
Yeah.
to drive you to new skills, new abilities, you know, ultimately to break down barriers inside of yourself, not to get rid of the fear, but to just have a more holistic life, a life worth living.
Yeah. And the one thing about writing this book was, and I wrote it with my writing partner, John. He said, okay, look, you've got all these great stories, but we got to like make this into a system. And I remember being a new instructor in the military. And when you teach a class for the first time, you really, really get into it and learn a lot more than you did before you started preparing to teach. And by getting into this writing process with Mastering Fear and developing this system, I actually learned some new stuff along the way myself. And I remember I was in Europe with my kids this summer. We had this massive issue with Facebook changing their algorithm, and the business that I run today is media publishing and e-commerce. And so we spent a lot of money on ads on social media and performance marketing. We spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a month on Facebook, and we get a return. Well, Facebook shut us down. They labeled us as a gun seller.
Oh my
We don't
gosh.
sell guns, but they're like they saw this military guys on one of our landing pages, and they shut us down for almost a week, and we lost 3 4 days, almost a couple $100,000 in revenue. And I was, you want to talk about being freaked out and scared. I all this self-talk started coming into my head. You're gonna lose your business. You're gonna have to let go employees, all this stuff. And I'm dealing with this as I'm in Nice, France with my kids to watch the World Cup match. And I literally went back and I was like, okay, I got this system. And okay, where am I at in this process? And inserted myself in the system that I created with Mastering Fear. And okay, and I just talk myself off the ledge. And I knew like the self-talk. I'm good at that when the voices of doubt start chiming in, which we all have that self-talk.
But I wanna ask you before the self-talk, when the first self-talk you were doing right then was, uh, "The business is going to fail, I'm gonna be living in out of my car," or whatever you were thinking, like, I know that feeling too,
Yep.
when you feels like
Yeah.
if your business goes down for one day, it feels like your business just declared bankruptcy, like,
Yeah.
there's that you can't help sort of projecting everything the trend into the future, even if it's a one-day trend or a one-week trend, and I feel so bad, but it always brings me back to the worst moments in prior businesses, like, that's where the fear is coming from, and did you find that because you had a prior business which,
Yeah.
you write about in the book, which blew up and you
Yeah.
had to deal with the consequences. Did you feel in your body the way you felt in your body when that business was
Yeah, I
failing?
think that was the first emotion I felt and reaction. And then I said, wait a minute. I'm going about this wrong. I need to take my own advice, right? I just wrote this book on Master Fear. I said, let me look at everything and figure out what we can learn from this experience. Okay, one, we need to we need to get better as a business on getting back to Google, hitting our email list, doing retargeting. Plus, it showed me, give me the financials. I talked to my controller. I'm like, whoa, how do we let our margins slip this far? And because one of our products, the Crate Club, which is this James Bond box that we send out to men every month, it's like James Bond in a box. We had let our margins slip, and when you add, like, the cost of the customer acquisition cost against the product, I said, "This model isn't gonna work long term. We need to get to 90, 100% margin," and my team was like, "That's impossible." I was like, "No, no, no, it is possible. We have to make our own product." And so I realized that this I said and I talked to the team because my team was freaking out. We had to pay vendors 30, 60 days out from already net 60. They're screaming at, my ops guy, my controller is crying. I got him on the phone. I was like, look, everything is going to be okay. We have a good business. We have customers. It's a recurring revenue model. We have subscribers. If we had to eat top ramen for 30 days on the first of the month, we're going to get the rebills and we're flush with cash. So it's gonna be okay, and we're gonna get better as a business by going through this process. And
It
they
did
took a
did
deep breath and like, "Oh my god, thank you for saying that."
so I mean, that almost reminds me of, like, whenever I get a letter from the IRS, I call my accountant, and he says, "Don't worry, I'll call him, we'll take care of this," and he has this
Mhm.
deep voice, and I feel
I've
so
got those
comforted.
letters too, they're terrible. As soon
Eh
as I open that white envelope with IRS,
yeah,
my heart starts beating
yeah.
fast.
No, that's fear, and now I've learned to channel that fear
Yeah.
into calling my accountant instead of avoiding it and hiding the
Yeah,
letter.
just get it away.
So, but, uh, did you kind of analyze what a worst case scenario would be? Because you don't talk about that
Absolutely.
much in the book,
I
the worst case
did.
scenario aspect.
In this case, for sure, I did worst case scenario, and it wasn't that bad, and that's when
What was it?
I'm a worst case scenario, we got banned from Facebook, and we couldn't recover. Then I had to look at, okay, what profit lines, still generate revenue, and yeah, worst case, it was I'm gonna have to get rid of people. Like, I'm gonna have to let people go and rebuild, but we still have a stable, core business, and so I went to that worst case scenario, and it wasn't that bad, and so I talked to the team, and we talked about earlier about the tension of the arena and the performance, whether you're doing stand up. I was like, this is not this is where I told my team, this is an opportunity for us to kind of get smacked in the face and go, wake up, guys. Like, get look at what we're doing and how we can do it better across the board, not only with our marketing. And that was when I called my friend Nina, who runs all of Google Eastern Europe. I said, "Who's the best performance marketing agency out there? We have an in-house team, but we need more help." I got that set up. We just all started working as a team and we're now much better prepared for
So
the
so
future
so
because of that.
there's a couple things you describe there, which are almost precursors to your method of mastering fear. I mean, and you talk about them in the book as well, but this self-awareness aspect, like, okay, my mind's going crazy. I'm giving too much energy to the problem instead of the solution.
Yeah.
And that's the average way people deal with fear. And that's the reason businesses go out of business and competitors don't win and stand-ups bomb and
When
whatever.
I first
Relationships fail.
when I lost my first business, that's where I went. When it the day I had the conversation with my attorney and it was done, it was a huge weight off my shoulders. And then I started going into, oh my God, this is terrible. I lost my money, I let my family down, my friends and family money. I'm gone. In fact, I owe people money. And
What you just said is interesting. You said, "I'm gone." Did you feel like, you had put all of your self-worth in the value of this business, and since the value of the business was now 0, did you feel like you were worth 0?
yeah, yeah, you feel worthless.
Eh
And so, but then I caught myself and I said, wait a minute, you used to be this guy that taught positive mental mindset in the sniper program. Timeout. Let's look at the positives of this situation. The fact that in that 3.5 years of starting the business and losing it, I'd raised with partners almost $4 million in capital. I've been at multiple meetings with banks and understand the SBA lending process. I know how to read financial statements. When I was first started the business, I had no idea how to read a P&L or balance statement. It was intimidating to me. Now I look at them like it's basic arithmetic,
yeah.
but it's very intimidating. And I was like, I went to business school along the way. I had all these skill sets. I said, I'm fine. Like I can go to businessbroker.com or whatever it is, find a business that some baby boomer wants to get out of that's spitting off a couple hundred grand a year and scale it. So um, the moment I made the decision to look at the positives of the situation rather than focus on the negative, which is just bringing me down. That was when I started to build up my self-image again and go, okay, I'm fine. Like this is going to be okay. And I was practical about it. I had to go get a job. I ended up working for a division of L3 Communications, which was a great experience. Taught me I didn't want to be a corporate guy. um,
But then you had this just a few weeks ago, or months ago, when you had this problem with Facebook with your current business. You had this flashback to not only the fear, but probably that feeling of I'm a 0, I'm gone,
yeah,
as you put it.
and I mean, that's one of the things I love about this book is that it really. shows people that we are living like fear is something we're going to live with for the rest of our lives. It's how we choose to deal with the fear is what separates. Um, it separates really. When you think of it, even in happiness, right? It's like you're either going to let fear control your life, or you're going to let it be a positive force for good. And that's a prime example of I was having a great time in Europe. I have a good business. I have other sources of revenue. And when this happened, boom, I went to that place, but I caught myself and I said, I took my own advice, right? I literally was like, okay, um, no, I got to start thinking about this differently. And so it just, I'm a Navy SEAL. People assume that, I'm this fearless guy, and it's just not the case. Like we all, regardless of, I've met some of the most successful people, from a guy, Scott Kelly, I mentioned in the book, who's an astronaut, test pilot, amazing guy. He was like, I was scared to apply for NASA. I didn't think I was good enough.
Sorry.
And he said, he's like, I sorted through it and figured out that if I don't apply, the certainty is they'll never take me if I don't fill out the application. So, it just shows you, like, some of the most successful people in the world, we all deal with this fear, and
It's
I
almost like fear is I'm just gonna think about it in mathematical terms. It's like gravity. It's everywhere all the time, and it's how we deal with it.
yeah,
It determines whether we fall to the ground or, figure out ways to fly, as being overly corny about it, but it's
yeah,
you
and
can't avoid the fear that's everywhere, as we're built with it. It's instinctive. We have tribal animals, primates had to have fear to survive in the jungle, and we have the same DNA still.
yeah. One of the best books I've ever read is called The Tree of Knowledge, by Umberto Maturana, and it's one of the hardest books I've ever read as well, because it's just a vocabulary that I had to literally read the book with a dictionary. But it talks about environment and fixed ideas, and like how, like, even at a single cellular level, like the environment changes, cell structure. And it takes you on this beautiful journey of humanity and what it means to be human. But at the very end, they talk about people latching on to having a fixed mindset versus open mindset. So they have these fixed views of the world based on their experience. And not too long ago, it was commonly thought that the world was flat, and then it was okay. Well, the Earth doesn't rotate around the sun, right? Like, there's all these, like, very things that we take for granted today. They're like, "Oh, of course it's that way." But you were a kook to think any other that the world was anything other than this flat thing you're gonna sail off the edge of in the boat. So, when you translate that to fear, I tell the story of the jungle training where they had to eat, um, they showed you how to, like, trap monkeys to eat for survival, and how you trap a monkey in the Philippines. You dig a hole, you put something of value in there. In this case, it was the coconut, and you make these sticks in the hole so the monkey sticks the hand in, grabs the coconut, but can't pull it out. And the thing is, the monkey won't let go of the coconut. All he has to do is let it go, and he's free. He won't let go. He's sitting there looking at the the Filipino guy coming to club him in the head and kill him, and he just still won't let go of this coconut. And I feel like I tell that story in there because the coconut is a lot of people's, they're holding on to these fears and these stories in their head. And one of the thing I really respected about you when we met was you told this story and were vulnerable about how you were dealing with your own confronting your fear of public speaking. And if you saw that, and then you made a conscious decision to let go and take the journey. And there's so many people that just don't do that, and they end up in these miserable relationships. They're in these careers where they thought at one point, "Oh, I'm gonna be a doctor or a lawyer. I'm gonna make all this money," and then they get into these professions and they're absolutely miserable, and they just won't let go.
Yeah, and they
Um,
they, they have excuses. They say, "I can't." Um, they don't say, "Okay, this is this is an opportunity." Like, I'm afraid to do public speaking, so this is an opportunity to figure out maybe 10 ways I can battle this fear, and then just simply do them. And like you taught Kamal how to deal with his fear, in swimming, it's almost like what you did was you well, we'll get into it more in a little bit, but you created a very safe environment for him to be in the water without fear, and you build up from that in this particular case. But the biggest step for him and the biggest step for you, and we're going to get back into your story about your business, is you after all this self-talk and feelings of disaster happening, you made the decision, "Look, I'm not gonna go down that path. I'm gonna start thinking in terms of solutions instead of disasters." So
Yeah.
that decision is the first part of your process. But there's something else there. The self-awareness aspect that, "Oh, I see what's happening in my head. It's bad. I need to reverse it." Then there's positive self-talk. "I did this, 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 this. I should be able to survive this." And meaning I should be able to come up with solutions once I switch my thinking, which you haven't done yet. I mean, in the process, but you're about to.
Yeah.
And then there's a third thing, which is really important, and you mentioned it briefly, actually, in the decision chapter. Surround yourself with wisdom, which is, I think, taken for granted. What you just said before, when you were describing the business from a few months ago, is one of the first things you did was you called your contact at Google.
Yeah.
So you called the second largest company in the world, the person who decided your fate or fury, whatever you wanna call it, and you said, "Give me advice," which is I find to be a great technique. If someone is is called and their advice is asked for, it kind of puts them off guard because 'cause you're giving them status. So no matter what they felt about you or your business before, it's now this, again, tribal thing like, "Oh, this person just gave me status. Okay, I'll help him out." And she did. And I think it's underestimated the power of, uh, preparing years or decades in advance for fear.
Yeah,
Because
and
and that's by building up a network of wisdom, of people
yep.
who you can make those calls to no matter what the situation.
I'm and you bring up a really good point about, and I talked about it earlier, about environment. Like, our our environment is so critical. And when I say that, I mean who you hang out with, like your friends, even sometimes your family. There's I there's been many situations where I've had conversations with my kids who are around family members that are just not in a good places. And I I remember last Christmas I rented a house in Lake Tahoe. It's a family tradition. We go skiing every year, and there was a member of the family that my kids, I know they feel a certain way about, and I understand because 'cause they're very negative. They get around, they just talk down to other people, and they don't even realize they're doing it. And I say, "Look," um, I just sat my kids down. I said, "Look, we know this. Here's the thing. It's much harder to be kind than clever. So for one, I don't wanna hear any smart back talk. The other thing is just remove yourself from the environment. Just tell the person, "Look, I really don't, wanna get into this conversation now, and excuse yourself and leave the environment." 'Cause the being around those kind of people that are negative, and today in the world of social media, it's so important as well to curate that environment. So you surround yourself with people who are positive and loving, and are going to amplify what you do and the person that you wanna become.
Well,
And
and I'm always gonna interrupt, I'm
yeah,
sorry,
no
and I
problem.
also know we have a tight time frame, but I wanna point out in your book, there's 2, interesting anecdotes. One is someone who wants to start a business, but specifically disconnects from her family for a little while because she knows they'll be negative about her starting a business, and this has happened to me so many times where I've had to.
Yeah, that's Maria, I think,
Yeah,
in the book.
I kind of have in those situations a one strike and you're out policy, which is very hard because I talk to a lot of people about this who say the exact same thing. They have the exact same problem. And a lot of people say, well, 6 years ago, this person helped me move when I was down and out. So I have to be loyal back. And I'm like, yeah, but now is now. You have to be able to build your career. And they're off in their own toxicity and
Yeah,
they're not asking for your help and they're just bringing you down. You have to have some policy of eliminating toxic people. The other thing you say, which is related to this, is you quote Paulo Coelho, author of The Alchemist, and you say, haters are just confused admirers. So what I take from that in terms of action is okay. you're a hater, which means you're a confused admirer. The only way I'm gonna get you not confused anymore is if I go off and do something, and then you could admire what I do. Because 'Cause I'm not gonna you can't ever logically change someone's mind. You can't argue with anybody because 'cause
Yeah.
they're not gonna change their opinion because their hand is on the coconut.
Yeah, one I remember, um, Mark Harmon, who's one of the most successful TV actors ever of, NCIS. He has a production company called Wings. Him and I were working on a TV project together and got to be friends because his father was in the military. His father was a Heisman Trophy winner at Michigan and, left a professional football career to join the Army Air Corps and was a bomber pilot in World War II, then went on to fly one of my favorite planes, the P-38, Lightning, over China, and his dad just had this amazing story, and Mark and I kind of bonded over that, and Mark was a guy that was the quarterback at UCLA and had a career that he coulda went into immediately into the NFL. He left and he wanted to act, and I was really struggling. It was the first time I was getting a little bit of success and limelight, and I had former teammates coming out on social media trying to tear me down and hate, and I saw it. I knew what it was. Like, I was like, "Okay, that guy over there, he's the guy I kicked out for cocaine, and he's out of the community. This guy got kicked out for performance." So I knew they were just unhappy people and what it was, but what what bothered me was that, um the confused 15-year-old admirer. Like, why would this guy say this? He was this guy. So, but Mark just sat me down and he was like, "Look, I'm gonna share some personal stories with you about what people would say to me when I'm in a huddle at UCLA. The stuff that they would call my dad a coward and say all this stuff." And he just told me, he's like, "Look, you really have to be careful on who you hang out with and surround yourself with good people and realize that anyone that takes the time out of their day to trash talk somebody, like, energy into it, and I'm talking, like, on social media, wherever, that person, like, there is no happy, successful person in life that has the time to do that kinda thing, and you just gotta recognize that
I think I'm gonna steal that line from you, by the way.
and hang out with the right kinda people, and that's why, I mean, I love hanging out with Kamal, and I love hanging out with you. It's like I built this really great network of friends and people that and family that I hang around and I love, and I know that we're all dealing with shit,
Right,
but it's like
and it's these kind
support
of
a positive support system, you know?
and to do this process of mastering fear and, let's say, turning it into a superpower, I do feel like there are these precursor skills, like, the self-awareness to identify that negative self-talk and turn it into positive, the listing positive attributes that kind of boost you up again, the the fact that are in a constant process of networking, and I'm a horrible networker, but I always try to, and I know you do this too, I always try, even when there's a small opportunity, to do a favor. Not because I expect future favors back, but because that's in part how you build up this 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 room of wisdom around you, when you need it. And it's at that point when you have kind of like your your wisdom board and your positive self-talk, and your self-awareness, then you can make the decision, which is the first part of your process, that you describe. I can and I'm going to deal with this fear. Like Kamal, when when he first comes to you, it's not that he says, "Oh, I can't do it because this is." He's like, you told him, show up at the swimming pool. He made a decision. Okay, I'll be there, and he did it, and that's the decision. So we all have
Yeah.
to come up with this decision. That's the first part of your process, and you exemplified it with how you dealt with this catastrophe in your company. I wanna now go back to almost the cliche example of fear when someone's about to shoot you, because I was just really curious about this one scene, so I have to keep asking about it. A bunch of guys who basically wanna kill you start getting closer and closer. Why didn't they just shoot you?
That situation was we were in Afghanistan and
2002.
yeah, 2002. This might even have been right up into 2000, like I think it was either right before Christmas or right after Christmas. Either like 2001 Christmas or, Happy New Year. You're in Afghanistan. Go chase bad guys in the mountains. So we were we were on this mission that was supposed to be a 1 day mission. We were gonna take some Marines with us, chopper in, get off. The Marines would set this perimeter up on this valley, and we would go so we could go inside and clear this cave complex. That was they called it what was it called? I think it was Tarnak Farms 2 or something. It was two main training camps in Afghanistan. One was in Kandahar, the other one was up north, and this one had been was strategically bombed. We went in right after to do like a battle damage assessment and see if there's any bad guys. So we were in there and we just started finding all sorts of stuff. We were in these caves. We're finding like American radios with crypto on it. Left like stuff that was um, like we had given to our allies that ended up in Afghanistan. It was just crazy stuff. So we started finding all this intelligence, and we would call it back and report it back to headquarters. And then we ended up literally. I remember this is another lesson that has nothing to do with fear, but I remember this big explosive ordnance disposal guy. His name was Steve. He was this big bodybuilder guy, and we had these EOD guys along, so we could blow our way through doors if we needed to. So we had all these charges, and some charges are we use water because it the force of water push. We had all this extra water bottles just like this. Um, we had called for the extraction. We're at the extraction point. You could hear the H-53 helicopters, which is a massive helicopter. You could hear the like whoop 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 of the blades. The sun's going down, and then I remember the Captain Harwood at the time was in charge of the tactical operations center. Um, he basically said, "You guys aren't coming home, or I need you out. You're going to stay out there and continue to exploit the intelligence." Well, we had
Meaning because why were these Afghanistan, um, guys having so much? Why do they have so much American equipment on
yeah,
them? It's weird.
equipment. There was all sorts of like we were finding other activities and reporting on it. He's like, "You guys need to stay out there. There's still like a lot of stuff going out. Just stay out there." So as I remember, um, I saw Steve taking his water and just, like, pouring it out because he didn't wanna carry the weight anymore. He's like, "Oh, the choppers are coming. I'm gonna pour out the water." And I was like, "Hey, man, give me that." So I filled up all my canteens because I know, like, hydration is everything. So I drank, like, 3 bottles, topped off all my water bottle, and then I'm like, "Okay, I'm good. I'm full up, ready player one." And the helicopters get called off, and Steve is, like, pouring out the last of his water, and he realized what he had done. I'm like, "You idiot, like, we're in the middle of nowhere, and you're pouring out good water," and he had to literally so we end up being out there for I think it was over 10 days, and, there's Steve at the Afghan well, like, with those little, purification tablets, which tastes like hell, like, dropping it in there, having to drink this crap water. Um, so the lesson learned there is, um, don't don't prepare for the extract, until it happens, right?
Well, again, it's always like prepare. Keep in mind the worst case scenario has some
Yeah.
reasonable
Eh
probability.
yeah, don't count the chickens before they hatch, don't count your money before the check's in the bank, all that stuff,
Which happens
and
all the time, like, you could
yeah,
so many how many times have you been in a sales deal and they're like, "Oh, of course, we love this. We'll send you the contract tomorrow," and then you never hear from them again.
yeah. I mean, this amazing story about the Beats story, right? When Beats sold to, Apple for whatever $1 billion. Um, I forget, the partner involved, but he's like, "Just don't say any."
Jimmy Iovine said
Jimmy
to Dr.
Iovine,
Dre.
it just says to Dre,
Dr. Dre says
just
to everyone, "We just sold to Apple."
yeah, he's like, "Just shut up for the weekend, let it happen," and
Wait, hold on a second. Jay, are you serious? We actually have 10 minutes?
yeah. So and then some video ends up on social media of them celebrating and saying, "Yeah, we're billionaires," blah, blah, and it almost killed the whole deal, right? But to get to your story, so that's the background. So now we're in there and we get um, at night this C-130 gunship, which patrols this kill box. had killed a couple guys, and they said, "Hey, we need you to go out there pre-dawn and check it out." And so we got the GPS coordinates. We had a squad, which I think we had 7 guys with us. We went and patrolled out there. We set up right at the GPS coordinate, which was in this kind of valley, and we laid up, kind of concealed ourselves, and our chief and a couple guys went. We set the perimeter. They went to kind of look for the bodies. And the sun had just started coming up, and then I spot these guys in the cave, and
In the cave.
they were coming. It was about probably 500 meters away, and they started coming out of the cave, and you could hear talking, and then they were praying. You could hear the prayer, and so I looked at Cassidy, who was our platoon commander, who is now in charge of the whole NASA astronaut program, was
Wow.
the second Navy SEAL astronaut. I got Cassidy. I signaled to him, and we called on the radio to the guys that were out there to get down, and then they had then we noticed that they had seen us, but they're too far away to really give effective fire. Um, and they probably couldn't. We were hunkered in, so they saw something, but the situation is starting to escalate. The sun's up. They're elevated. We're down here, which is never a good
Did they
position to be
try
in.
firing?
We had an exchange of fire start happening, just like a small exchange, and
As people do.
yeah, and then, I remember we had because we were just planning on this one mission, I didn't have my full sniper kit. Normally, I have a laser rangefinder, sniper rifle. We have to call in an airstrike, and I have to guesstimate. So Chris, my platoon commander, looks at me and says, "Hey, I need a range and bearing to target." He's got the B-52 on the radio, and I'm going, "Okay, maybe I'm gonna guess a little bit long on this first drop." So I wanna guess short. We're already dropping danger close to us. Like a 500-meter drop, is pretty close, and to the point where Cassidy had to give permission. He had to give his Social Security number to the aircraft to authorize the danger close drop because 'cause we're practically dropping these bombs on ourselves. And so all this is happening, um, and then 60 seconds to impact, we hear a baby crying because these bad
Mm.
guys had their families with them. So that was a pretty heavy moment. As a guy, I was like about to have his own son while I was deployed to Afghanistan. The first bomb drops. It drops a little long. You know, I think we get maybe half of them. We call up, second bomb takes out everybody. But it was pretty intense. Like it, it started out as everything is okay. I see these guys. We're taking the rec action. Well, then we realize they see us, and then things start to escalate. I mean, thank goodness we had the radio guys call, and we had the contact with the aircraft. And then it was okay, but it was like, it escalated pretty quickly. And so, I
Like,
mean,
how on a scale of 0 to 10, how scared were you?
I don't I wasn't scared in the moment. I got like that anxious. I was more scared afterwards because I'm like, man, that was intense. Like if that hadn't have gone, that could have gone way bad for us. Um, and I think, yeah, I mean, I had a couple near death experiences in Afghanistan where it's like you realize after the fact, okay, wow, that was intense. Like that
Now,
was,
this is gonna sound,
and but
not so
but that I don't want to sound um like I didn't have fear in those moments. That the training does kick in. Like we go through so much training, and when you're in those moments, we train to deal with that situation.
right, and it's almost like a different kind of fear because you know when that fear kicks in, these are the 5 things you have to do. It's like in your manual.
Yeah,
But like a business failing, every business fails in its own unique way, else you would have had the experience to make it succeed and not fail.
yeah,
So that kind of fear, like, I wanted to ask you, I was just curious while reading the book. And by the way, because obviously we're not gonna go through your whole process of mastering fear, but it's really brilliant the process you come up with, and you really do turn
thanks.
um, fear in so many different situations, whether it's relationships or business or teaching someone a hard skill or learning a hard skill. You teach people how to convert that fear into ways to move forward, and we'll maybe still get to some of those. But I was curious, going completely other end of the spectrum from being in Afghanistan, How old were your kids when you got divorced?
Oh, I think Hunter was 7, Olivia was 5, and, Grayson was 2, so very,
And so,
very
like,
young.
the 7-year-old and the 5-year-old, you would read them stories to sleep at night. Did they ever have a nightmare and, you would go downstairs and see what the nightmare was about and
Yeah.
comfort them?
Oh, yeah, no, I remember, this is a funny story. I was in my house, and I was writing. I just think written I'd sold an article to FHM magazine. It was when I first started writing, and I had a Heineken. I remember I was sitting in my chair, I was writing on my laptop, I had my Heineken, I put my Heineken down because I heard Olivia's she was crying from her bedroom, so I go back in there, I go and I comfort her, she's having a nightmare. I walk out, my beer is flipped over, and I was like, "Man, that thing was 3 quarters full and it's gone, there's not a big mess." I'm like, "Okay, that doesn't." I go in the fridge, I get another Heineken, and I come out, and then I see my 2-year-old son, Grayson, walking around, and he's got this, like,
Oh my
swagger.
gosh.
I'm like, "He drank the beer." 2 years old. So I get on my I called my friend
Very,
Glenn.
prodigious children.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it was Glenn or Eric, one of my medic buddies in the SEAL team, like, "Hey, this happened." He's like, "Hey, just keep an eye on him. As long as he's doing this, he's like, he should be okay."
So, again,
And I had to
you
tell my
you you
wife, I'm
your
like, "I
source of
just."
wisdom you
Yeah.
called when you had to live here. But what I was
Yeah.
gonna get to was when you're going through a divorce, you're not you realize one of the things you realize is you're not going to be around those kids ever again in the same way. It's not gonna be like when they're going to school, you're with them those 250 days of the year
Yeah.
straight.
And I actually think this is a great topic, and people don't talk about divorce and family enough because it's just like this elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about it, and I feel like especially judged because I don't live with my kids full time. I don't know what your arrangement
I
is,
don't live
but
with my kids full time. My kids are with are o they were just with me for, different amounts of weeks, and this is their last week with them, and, so maybe that's why I was thinking
yeah,
of this. But I just wanna mention when I read about your divorce and the kids, one thing I was thinking was, when I got divorced, the thing I was afraid of the most, and this really almost incapacitated me, was that I would not be able to be there when they woke up in the middle of the night having a nightmare.
yeah,
I was no there was probably never going to happen again.
yeah,
Even though, it could happen when they were staying with me, but it's a random event, so it may never happen again. And I wonder if that was a thought,
yeah.
a
I
fear.
I mean, I had this. I would when I divorced, I was coaching little league and enjoyed it. I had this vision of fatherhood for the future, and we were in marriage counseling. And when we decided to end the relationship, um, and it was really her, I was holding on to it. I didn't wanna be a failure. And we decided, thankfully, we had a great lady we were working with that really helped us have a good divorce, and build and work at a friendship that we have a strong bond today. But yeah, I was afraid I just lost this whole vision of what I thought being a dad was gonna be like, and was in an empty house alone by myself, having to have the conversations with the neighbors. "Where's your wife? Where's your kids?"
Yeah, those shameful
Yeah,
conversations.
having to bump into the little league commissioner. "Hey, you coaching this year?" So I had to deal with all that stuff. Um,
And again, that feeling
and
of I'm not they could be having a nightmare tonight and I'm not gonna be able to
y
comfort them.
yeah, or they get bullied at school, and I'm
Yeah.
not gonna be there. So, I would and, our situation was unique. Um, my wife at the time had a good family support system. They had this beautiful ranch in Northern California. She's like, "I want to go up there," and she was dealing with stuff, and the psychologist we were working with said, "Look, happy mom, happy kids. You got to support her in this." And I was like, "No, the law says this. You can't move out of the county." But I made peace with it, and then over time, we built this amazing relationship to the point where even the in-laws kinda take sides in the beginning, but we started setting the example, and both our sets of parents kinda fell in, and today I get text messages from my former mother-in-law, like, "Congratulations on the new book." We
So
have this, like, amazing relationship.
So, when you're first going through it though, and you're like, you feel this palpable loneliness, particularly because, you're torn away from your children for the first time. Maybe I'm dramatizing it too much, but uh, how did you tell yourself, okay, I'm going to deal with this fear, and then what was the jumping off point? You jumping off as part of your process
Yeah.
in dealing with fear. What was your jumping off point where you're like, okay, my relationship with my kids are going to be different, but it's going to be great. I'm going to make it great in my own way.
Yeah, that was it. I don't know remember what moment it was, but that was the catalyst, right? I realized, okay, my relationship with my kid has changed. My idea of what a fatherhood is in the future has changed. How do I have a positive how do I create this into a positive and make it the best situation possible? And so I came up with a plan. We decided, look, for stability, let's not do this back and forth stuff. They'll be with you, you'll be with your family on your family's ranch, which helps us. You know that she had a beautiful house to stay in Paso Robles, and we just decided, okay, this is how we're going to, this is how uh, w- we're going to have a co-parenting relationship in the future. And I would get the kids in the summer, and we'd have a winter holiday. And so I said, I'm going to build a tradition of adventure in the summer, and then we're going to take this family ski trip in the winter. And I taught the kids from nothing, um, in into expert skiers. My daughter's on the ski race team this year in high school. So I created this tradition, and we FaceTime, and we have our way, and it's a very positive environment. I when I can, and their mom got remarried, had 2 more daughters. Her husband's a great guy. He's a chiropractor, yeah, up in Oregon, and I literally have the kind of relationship where it was not last Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving before. I have an investment property in Oregon. I went up there and I said, "Look, how about I just cook dinner, Thanksgiving dinner for everybody?" So all her family came over, her husband and I cooked Thanksgiving dinner, and we're like, you know,
So
sharing
so
stories. That's the kind of relationship I have. And
so again, it's this focus on always being self-aware when, I mean, and this is what we just talked about, was not necessarily fear, but also depression. Your same process
yeah,
applies. And like the process itself is, let me find where I bookmarked it. The process itself is decision, coming to the decision of dealing with the fear, rehearsal, kind of, I guess, getting in safe scenarios where you could encounter the fear, but very deeply it's not going to harm you. Letting go, really deciding that, okay, I'm gonna feel the fear, and I'm gonna somehow sit with it and figure out new ways to deal with it. Jumping off, where now you have to really come up with a long-term plan of dealing with the fear or the depression or whatever. And then what I think is the most important, what you say is the most important, is knowing what matters.
yeah,
And I remember when I was reading in your book about knowing what matters, I was thinking, "Boy, this is gonna be great. I'm gonna get in this podcast, and I'm gonna say, that reminds me of Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, the stories you're telling." And then, like, the very next page, it's just like Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. So I'm like, "Oh, Brandon thought of it." But, knowing what matters is, I mean, that's how Viktor Frankl, as an example, survived, the worst concentration camps in World War II, and so many people didn't. That's how knowing what matters, like your kids in this case, allows you to go all the way back and make the decision. I need to deal with this fear.
yeah,
Uh, I need to figure out how to let go, how to jump off, because what matters to me is my family. I think that's such an important, also, precursor skill.
yeah,
No, knowing
absolutely. I think it's one of I mean, the reason I put it at the end because it's so important, and I see so many people, and you probably experience this too. They go, "James, I wanna be rich." And you're like, "Okay, what's rich? What's the number?" They don't even know what the number is.
Right, and you bring up the point, like, you turn a lot of kind of self-help advice upside down, but you bring up the point that, it's BS to say money's not important, because obviously it is important.
Yeah,
If you could do a lot of things with money, hopefully good. Unfortunately, some bad, but and hopefully people listening to this do good things with it, and you can enjoy life. You can pursue your passions more if you have some money, and that's why we're all trying to succeed and build careers and so on. But fear, you know, just going for money will never get you there. Because
Yeah.
if you're competing against, let's say you're building your media business, the media business you have right now. Let's say you had and the topic is roughly what you've been doing all your life, which is relating to, the things you studied and learned and experienced as a Navy SEAL. Like you said, this James Bond crate box is one of your products. You're passionate about that because you have been for 30 years. If your competitor is someone who's not so passionate, but is focused on making $50 million, you're gonna crush him.
Yeah.
Because passion, I feel, and tell me if I'm wrong, passion creates nuance. It creates an understanding of nuance because you're able to see in between the small crevices that the other people who are they're all they stop they're capped where the money is, and you're capped where much higher where your passion is.
Yeah, I mean, our biggest competitor in that kind of monthly gear subscription box, and ours is the Crate Club. We went in to the market because I saw, I'm like, "Oh, these guys aren't passionate about this." Like, the number one guy it's the box is full of crap. It's like nothing against manufacturing in China, because China has a lot of good manufacturing capability. My iPhone is made in China, but a lot of the gear, stuff that's made in China is, it fits the stereotype where it's just kinda crappy, and I could tell there was no passion and, pride behind the product that we're sending out, and they were the biggest one, and it took us, only, I think, a year and a half to go from number 3 to number 1 in category
But
because we
that's why
care about it.
also when you experience this almost catastrophe, you're able to say as a solution, let's make our own product. Someone who's just an NBA looking at spreadsheets is not going to say, let's create our own James Bond like gadgets because they don't know how. They
Yeah,
didn't have the pleasure of studying these things and experiencing it. You did. So you're able to say, okay, well, if we use this part of this, you're able to kind of design your own way to make a product. You know, all the manufacturers, you're passionate about it, you know what matters. And so when fear hit you on this business, you're able to come up with so many, almost an exponential number of solutions to conquer that fear. Just like, the story starts off, you're teaching our friend Kamal how to swim. You teach him in a very unusual way how to swim. And it's again, it's not teaching him a swimming technique, it's teaching him a battling fear technique.
yes,
And
exactly.
studying what you did there, uh applies to every area of life, whether it's business or stand-up comedy. When you go out into the audience and you tell a joke and they're totally silent, that's scary.
Yeah,
And you have to know what matters to you there, and you have to do this process of, okay, decision, rehearsal, letting go, jumping off, knowing what matters, and then you can you get the experience to build up to turn those tense situations into good ones. Because tension is energy, and you could either use that energy to blow up,
yeah,
or you could use that energy to blow up in a good way, like
yeah.
to
Set
be
a world record.
enormous.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for listening to the James Altucher Show on YouTube today. I have a really special brand new episode coming out next week, but you can watch it early. Just click on the link right here or subscribe to the channel when you click on my face. Oh, wait though, don't forget to click the bell. I'll see you next time.